Welcome back to A Story to Tell from the campus of Dixie State University. We're glad to have you back with us. We've got a lot of new guests coming, and we've got a brand new set. I think you're going to like it. We have a fabulous guest today. Victor, how are you?
I'm good.
It's good to see you. We have Victor Frei. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Start this side of heaven and fill us in.
Well, I was born and raised in Santa Clara, down in the valley.
Hey, there's a song about that, isn't there? Down in the valley?
Oh, yes, there is. Spent my boyhood in the schools in Santa Clara up to the 6th grade, and then we were transferred over to St. George to go from in the junior high and then through high school and school there. Went to the Marine Corps in 1943 when I was 19 years of age. Spent 3 years in the Marine Corps and came back home and because of the GI Bill went to school and got into education and became a teacher and a school principal and wound up in the school district office directing elementary education spent 37 years in the education program.
10 in Washington County?
In Washington County. 10 as a teacher, 9 as a principal, and 16 as the director of elementary education at the district level. So I had quite a varied experience. And as a result of that, I was able to live in Santa Clara all my life. Was mayor of Santa Clara and watched everything there grow up, and can remember the people that first came to Santa Clara, the Swiss colony that came and were my grandparents, and it's a small little valley but beautiful spot, and where we can garden and grow a little bit of everything. The interesting thing is that as I grew up, everybody had a cow and a few chickens and a horse and a pig or two. And
well, that was standard operating procedure in those days.
And everybody gardened, and that's still a little bit the case. We never let go of that. It's hard to get rid of, and we could grow most anything in Santa Clara. Fruit trees, melons, potatoes, you name it, and usually the year around. So it was the kind of thing where people got up at daylight in the morning and went to bed dark at night and started back over again. So we learned to work. When the war broke out and Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, of course, a great change came, and the population of Santa Clara stayed about 300 for 20 years. I remember my dad said, we'll never grow because there isn't water. But now we got technology. Before, we depended on what came off of Pine Valley Mountain and out around Enterprise down through what we call the Santa Clara Creek, and it was often that the creek would dry up about the end of July, so it was a struggle on what to plant and how to keep plants alive. And we always watched the Pine Valley Mountain. There was a saying that if we could see a spot of snow on the Pine Valley Mountain on the first day of July, we knew we had plenty of water. But that's a different story now. You can't see a spot up there. But anyway, I got a letter from Uncle Sam that you've been called to serve. And
this was 1943?
1943. And
you were 19 years old.
I was 19. And the common thing was that that notice told us that we were to be picked up in front of the old Dixie College building by bus to go to Salt Lake City to have a physical. And the bus picked up different ones over at Cedar City and Rockville and on up the line. And that day, there was about 50 of us on the bus that went to Salt Lake City to get our physical. About 4 o'clock in the afternoon, when it was all over with, the voice came over the intercom, Victor Frei, would you report to the office? And another young man from Rockville by the name of Ronnow Jennings, name was called. And when we got into the office, the master sergeant said, you two passed the physical among the highest. We have 2 openings in the Marine Corps. You don't, you're not drafted into the Marine Corps. You have to enlist. And so, but he said, if you want to take them, you'll need to be on the train at 11 o'clock tonight to head for San Diego for boot camp. And you know, in those days, everybody wanted to fight for our freedom. Yeah. I mean, it was I felt so sorry for the ones on the bus that didn't pass the physical. It hurt. They wanted to fight for our country. And so there was no hesitation that we weren't going to take those 2 opportunities to serve in the Marine Corps. So we went through boot camp together, Ronnow Jennings and I. And then you have a choice of which branch of the service you want to go in. And he put down the Marine Corps Infantry, and I put down the Marine Corps Air Force. And we parted company, but it was about 3 months, to make a long story short, that I was on a ship headed for the Solomon Islands, and was on that trip for 20 days.
On the ship? 20
on
days.
The ship to
That's
20.
a long cruise.
It was a big ship. It was a Dutch ship with a crew from India on it. A very different thing. I don't know why, but we went to the New Georgia group there, past Guadalcanal and New Guinea, and the aim was to go beyond Guadalcanal, where there's an air base, to get closer to Japan. And we were sent to a little island called Green Island that was a mile wide and 7 miles long. No civilization except a few natives that lived there, about 40 of them. I don't know how they got there. They were a small group of people that about 5 feet tall. A lot of them had signs of polio or some, a lot of fungus on their faces and things. But the unique thing about that island was that there was no fresh water. And the natives there would cut the coconuts in half and set them in a clearing so that when it rained, those coconut bowls would fill with fresh water, and that's how they survived. And of course, as we hit that island, because there was no civilization, no technology, we were assigned to start to build something to live in, and that meant putting up tents. Well, I was called with a crew of 12 young guys, and a master sergeant to go into the jungle, and the jungle was very dense. To chop poles down that would fit to make our tents. Our tents would be about 16 feet long and 18 feet wide, and they were to house 4 Marines. Well, we were all given an axe, and having been raised in Santa Clara, my dad owned a farm down along the Santa Clara Creek, and a lot of cottonwood trees grew there, and the thing was you cut those down for firewood for winter. And Dad taught me how to use an axe. I could cut an axe from either side, and I was young and strong. Well, when we started to cut the poles for our tents, I think I had 6 poles down before any of the others had a pole down. And the master sergeant said, "I want you by my side." So it was something for me through that little skill that I had learned on the farm in Santa Clara, that I wound up being his right-hand man, and oftentimes drove the commander in a Jeep, so that I had quite an experience. We built those tents, and then we had a foxhole that was outside the tent, just right on the edge of it, that was about 12 feet square and 6 feet deep. And at night, when we'd get the siren that'd go off that there's a chance of being bombed, we'd roll out of our cots and into that foxhole, so that our danger of being killed would have to be a direct hit in that foxhole. Now, in my time there, I spent a year on that island. I didn't kill anybody. I didn't see anybody killed. It was a different kind of calling than in my family. I had 2 brothers older than I that were in the European theater, and one was called as a cook, mess sergeant, if you will, and one was called in the medical corps. And so the callings were very different, and my second brother that was in the medical corps was one that was involved in killings and deaths, because they try to patch up the wounded and send the ones with the more severe wounds back to a different place for operations. And he was in a unit with 5 officers that were all doctors and 7 nurses that were all officers, and then around 50 enlisted men. And he talked a little about it. He didn't like to talk a lot about it, but they'd take the dead bodies and throw them on the back of a truck to be sent puller dog tags, and he hundreds of bodies that he watched killed. So it was very different than the situation that I was in. And they were pushing into France, and going through the forest, you never knew whether you was going to run into Germans or Americans. And they were taken captive for 3 days, and he said 2 of the officers were shot and one enlisted man. But then they stopped the shooting and put them in a building there, and said they were in there for 3 days without any food. They had water and a toilet, but they told them, "Don't you peek your head out the door or we'll blow it off." But after 3 days, they heard a unit coming, and one of the guys said, "I can't take it any longer. I'm going to look and see what it was." Well, it had a star on it, and it was a tank, American tank that was coming, and so they were released from their captivity. But when the tank people asked them if there's anything they needed, they said, thing we hurting the most with is no toilet paper. And so they threw him a bundle of money, if you can believe that, to use for toilet paper. And he said that they hadn't been paid for 2 or 3 months. A little later, when they were paid with that same money that they used for toilet paper and threw a lot of it away. So his experience was very different than mine.
And what was his name?
Shelby.
Shelby.
Right. He's still alive. There was 44 that were sent to war out of the Santa Clara Valley. Of course, the Heights wasn't here then. And like I said, the population was about 300.
What is it today?
I'm not positive what it is, but
A lot more than that.
a lot more. I think as far as church-wise, we have about 3 different stakes now. And of course, Ivans, that was a little, about 7 families up there in my day, is bigger than Santa Clara is now. And that development of Ivans has come clear down across, the heights into Santa Clara now. So, but anyway, it's out of that small group. The age difference ran from 19 years, about a 10-year span to the oldest ones. The interesting thing was that, and the thing that as I reflect about the war, if you were skilled in something, in other words, if you were a mechanic, trained a little, or a carpenter, a lot of those guys never did go overseas. They were stationed here in the States, some of them on maintenance and things, and I knew some of them that wanted to go overseas badly. They wanted to help fight, get on the front lines if that meant more. But they're unsung heroes that
Right.
did the job, here, and so.
I think people thought differently of soldiers in those days.
Yeah,
And
in
soldiers
those days.
themselves, not to denigrate today's soldiers, but had a different attitude.
They had a different thing, is right. It was an interesting experience, and then what happened to me, I'd been out about, as I said, a year, and the commanding officer there on that little island, by the way, when it was finished, we had B-17s, B-24s, B-25s, a little plane called a TBF that had a bombardier and a tail gunner and a pilot. And then, of course, that P-51 and the F-4Fs. And I did a lot of getting on the wing, directing a plane down the runway to take off, and we did a lot of fueling of the planes. And
So you were on that island to build a runway.
right. And I never saw a woman in the time I was there. There was one visitor came, and that was Eleanor Roosevelt. And one, you always have a little humor in spite of what.
Yeah.
And one morning when we went to chow, there was a sign in a mud hole there, and it said, "Eleanor slept here."
In the mud hole.
I didn't see her myself, but in that time, that was the unusual thing. There wasn't a woman that was on that island. And on our mess tray, Lucky Strike green has gone to war. Do you remember Lucky Strike? And they changed the color of that. They'd set a package of cigarettes on our tray, and we took a lot of Atabrine for malaria. And the thing that was the hardest for me going back to that island was that with no fresh water, we had a lava soap given to us to swim in the ocean to try to get clean, and that was next to impossible. Your skin felt like you had sandpaper on it. And I was concerned. I didn't have a girlfriend, and I left, and I was so concerned that I was going to, with all the fungus that was on their skins and things, that I was going to lose my hair, and nobody would want to look at a bald-headed young guy. That's a little different now. I know.
Everybody's bald-headed.
Everybody's bald-headed.
That's the end thing.
So what I did, we had the folding canvas water buckets, and I took 2 of them and hung on a couple of the corners, and it had rained at least every other day for a period. Caught that rainwater, and so I'd wash my head and my body.
So you didn't lose your hair?
I didn't lose my hair.
Did you find a girl when you got back?
Oh, well, I sure did when I got back. That wasn't very hard. A lot of the guys, though, that came back on furlough that had girlfriends married while they were on furloughs.
Yeah.
That wasn't my case. But
tell me a little bit about your family.
Well, my grandpa was named Rudolph Frei. He came with the Swift colony and settled there in Santa Clara, and then, of course, my father from Rudolph. We had in our family 4 boys and 2 girls. My oldest brother was Landon.
I've heard of Landon.
And my second brother was Howard. He's the one that was a cook in the Army. By the way, we thought after he learned to cook in the Army that when we went camping that we had it made. He never did want to cook again. You couldn't get him to cook. And then Shelby was the next one, and then I'm the youngest. Shelby's still alive. He's 93. Howard lived to be 93 and Landon 96. My dad lived to be almost 99. And I don't know what you attribute it to, but growing up in Santa Clara, we raised a lot of vegetables, which we still do. It's hard to get away from it. We love the fresh things there. Family's still tied up in growing fruit, and they're at the fruit market now that's still run by the family.
I remember that. I remember Landon. He used to deliver fruit and vegetables over to the store that my parents owned, the Ronnow Mercantile in Panaca, Nevada.
And I remember that name because Landon mentioned it to me.
We're almost related.
We are. Anyway, I think as I look at the people, the early settlers there, that most of them lived in their 80s or 90s. And it had to be due to hard work and exercise and fresh vegetables. It just amazes me as I look back at the history on that and how long people lived there. But it's a very small valley. You could put a good farm in somewhere else, and take the whole valley up, but it is amazing what you can raise on an acre of ground. Right. And
tell me about, how'd you meet your wife?
Well, when I came back from the Marine Corps, I'd accumulated a little saving. And I bought an automobile, if you can believe, in those days. And it was to get ready to go off to school up to BYU. And I was traveling out here on 700 East one morning, and this girl was standing on the corner.
Standing on the corner.
On the corner.
There's a song about that.
Well,
You guys have lived a musical life.
and as I passed, I looked at her and I thought, boy, that's a good-looking girl. And anyway, it happened that I was going with another girl, and it was Thanksgiving Day, and she invited me to Thanksgiving dinner. Well, lo and behold, she was a cousin to the one I saw standing on the corner, and the one that was on the corner I got to sit by at Thanksgiving dinner. And I still thought she looked just as good the second time. So after Thanksgiving dinner, the thing was to go to a matinee. And they said, would you like to go? And I said, I sure would. So anyway, after that, I asked her for a date if I could come and see her, and that's how it all got started.
How many children do you have?
I had 4 children, 3 boys and 1 girl. All of them live in Santa Clara, if you can believe that. It's not unusual for me to have all 4 of my boys drop by my home now. I mean, my 3 boys and my daughter.
Fantastic. We've got 1 minute left. What's the greatest thing that ever happened to you?
Well, I think being born and raised in Santa Clara. I love that town. We grew up riding horses for entertainment, and we'd head up toward Snow Canyon on our horses, beautiful scenery and things, but I've loved that place.
Victor, you've had a wonderful life, and it's wonderful for you to come and share it with a story to tell. We really appreciate that.
Oh, thank you very much.
We've been talking to Victor Frei today on A Story to Tell, and we welcome you back to A Story to Tell. We'll have a lot of interesting guests in the future. Thanks for being with us. This is Lane Ronnow.